Well, Marcello, how are you now?
Good, and you?
Not so bad. Are we going to do this the whole episode? So, hey everybody, welcome to Sweater Weather, podcast about Canadian arts and culture. I'm Aaron.
I'm Naomi.
And we're here with our friend Marcello Di Cintio, an author, nonfiction writer of several celebrated books. The latest was Driven, The Secret Lives of Taxi Drivers, right? And also an author of many really fun, cool, interesting articles, including one about a vaquero in Canadian Geographic. That's the ultimate horseman. And what are some other interesting? You've always got stories about fun articles you've been writing, nonfiction articles. What are some of your recent ones, Marcello?
Yeah, I've written some about old cinemas in Alberta.
Oh, fun, yeah.
I look back at what it was. I wrote 2 articles about Olympic wrestler Erica Weeb and wrestled her for the story. And
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's fun to do a bunch of different stuff.
What about the one on the Saskatchewan ski hill?
Oh yeah. That was more like adding words to a photo essay that this guy had taken these photos of rural prairie ski hills. And the people.
The concept is so funny,
but it's so great.
Very small,
very small ski hills.
There's a great picture of a young guy in a Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah, full denim
with skis on. It's feels so Letterkenny. I'm surprised.
Yeah,
it feels
true.
like an image that should be.
And there's some Mennonite girls there too, or Hutterite girls too, like in the full dresses and their helmets.
Incredible.
And no matter who they were, where how steep or not the hills were, or whether they were in their denim or their dresses, they all wanted speed. They were there for the downhill rush.
That's so fun. Yeah, so today we're talking about Letterkenny. I think at this point it's safe to call this a classic half-hour comedy series. This was written by and starring Jared Kesso, who plays Wayne. He's leader of the Hicks. And Letterkenny ran for 12 seasons. 81 episodes from 2016 to 2023. And it just recently wrapped up, I guess last year. So it was on Crave, the streaming platform. And I believe Letterkenny was the very first Crave original series.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, when they started that streaming platform. So Letterkenny takes place in the fun, fictional, small town of Letterkenny, Ontario. Now, this is kind of, Naomi was asking about the setting, because she's like, where is Letterkenny? So if you look up Letterkenny on Google Maps, have you ever done this, Marcello?
No.
It is a real place in southern Ontario, about 100 kilometers east of Ottawa. But if you zoom in on Google Maps and do like street view, the center of Letterkenny is literally a farmer's field. So I don't like, it's a town or township, but it doesn't even seem to have a downtown.
The Letterkenny on the show is not.
The Letterkenny on the show is not obviously the real Letterkenny. It was actually filmed in Sudbury, so I know it had Northern Ontario tax credits. And Jared Kesso, the creator and guy who plays Wayne, is from Listowel. That's how you say it. Listowel, Ontario, small Ontario town. And so a lot of the humor in the show is based on that, his experiences there.
Have you ever seen him interviewed or anything like that?
Oh yeah.
What's his voice really like?
Quite similar.
It's actually pretty similar.
Okay.
It's actually pretty similar. Now, I think I'm sitting here talking to a couple of city kids, aren't I?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are born and raised in cities.
Yep.
No, you. We didn't. We just watched that episode too. When they say "you" when they're looking at the sexy Instagram of Daryl's girlfriend, Anik. Some pretty fun scenes. I'm like, honestly, Letterkenny. I'm probably from a place kind of like Letterkenny in some ways, not St. Catharines where I spent a lot of my adolescence, but I grew up in North Pelham. Smaller than South Pelham. In the Niagara region, it's a small farm town. Used to be a farm town, kind of a bedroom community for the bigger cities in Niagara. And I lived like in a house kind of like Wayne and Katie's house. It looks very similar. I appreciate the interior, remarkably similar. That kind of old wooden house, wooden banisters and stuff. And little details I really love about actually the kitchen was laid out in a similar way too, like looking out on the dining room, the way it is in the show. And a detail I really appreciate about that house, that farmhouse, is a picture on the wall behind where Wayne is always sitting. And if you look at it, it's a picture of the farm, an aerial view.
Oh, is that right?
And
I've never noticed that.
And I'll be darned if we didn't have an aerial view photo of our farm. A photographer, what he would do is, this was his business. He would get in a small plane. He'd rent a small plane for the day, fly over the area, take photos of all the farms, and then after developing them, go and try to sell them. And he went door to door selling these photos. I remember
I'm sure everyone bought it.
When else are you going to get one of those, right?
Yeah.
In the 80s. This is the 80s, early 90s. So we had that picture on our wall.
So was your town like about 5,000 people like Letterkenny is supposed to be?
Yeah, like it might have been about that. Yeah. There was a little tiny downtown that had had a feed store.
Sure.
And it had an Avondale. The Avondale is the Niagara only convenience store chain. It was called Avondale, and there still are some of these relics around Niagara. But and there was an auto body shop as well. So and there was I lived on an old farm. It wasn't functioning as a farm anymore, but it had a barn. It had a big old barn that we built skateboard ramps in. That was what my friends and I did. It's the kind of thing you had to ride your bike 4 kilometers, to get to your friend's house. Maybe
right.
I had one friend I could ride my bike to, one friend's house, and so I lived on that farm from like the age of 5 to 15, 16. So
and did your town have like a Modine's, like the
I was
little
wondering
bar?
the same.
I was too young to go to the Modine's, but like my elementary school was in the neighboring town. It's called Fenwick, and it was very much actually Fenwick was a little bit more like Letterkenny's supposed to be, because it had just a few more things, and it did have a bar, and it might have had
an arena.
It had an arena, and it had a park, and it had a hardware store, just like it had a Royal Bank was downtown. It had a few extra things. Yeah, there was a watering hole there. Yeah. It was. I think it's currently called the Judge and Jester. And
So
there
I
was
think
also
Letterkenny-
a diner that was called the Green Lantern Diner, and all the old guys would be in the Green Lantern Diner. And if you could get a note from your parents at lunchtime, you could ride your bike with your friends to the little downtown in Fenwick and like get gummy candies at the convenience store, or a hamburger at the Green Lantern.
Right.
Yeah, you could do that. That was such a fun outing when you got to do that. So yeah, there's like a little bit of like small town Ontario reminiscences, like nostalgia for me a little bit with Letterkenny. Although obviously this is nothing like life in a small town at all. At all. Yeah. Anyway, I know I've been going on about this, but you know what we have to do, Naomi?
What?
Well, we have to set up our vegetable stand and sit out front and solicit business.
Yeah.
Although in the show they don't care.
Well, I watched.
Have they ever?
I've never seen anyone buy anything. I don't think they've ever sold a single radish off of that stand.
Well, we have a
The
bushel.
most action got burned down in one of the early seasons. Tanis.
Oh, that's right. It does.
Tanis burned it down.
That's right. Because there's a turf
There's
war.
a turf war.
That's
so do
right.
they actually have a farm, Wayne and Katie?
Well, yeah, but every now and then they're picking stones from the field.
Okay, so you see them farming.
Hay,
Barley.
barley. Yeah,
That's
it's correct.
barley.
People are like, oh, that's a bale of hay, and Wayne corrects them and says it's barley.
Oh, okay.
It's a running gag.
Okay.
One of many on the show. But let's try to shill our bushel of cucumbers here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like sweater weather, and I know our friend Marcello loves sweater weather. He's the first repeat guest, which we very much appreciate. Always came to our live shows when we were doing those regularly. If you love sweater weather as much or more as Marcello, and you want to get access to all of our episodes, that's 2 premium episodes a month. You can sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Canadian Sweater. We're now producing an episode a week. 2 of those are free to the public on our public feed, and 2 of those are privatized. They're behind a wall where you have to put your credit card number in to get it. And we really appreciate everybody out there who does that. And so, yeah, if you're a patron of the show, you'll be getting a brand new sweater weather every single week.
And give
in
us
your
a
inbox.
rating.
Oh, yeah. And if you like the show, you can give us a rating or review on any podcast app that allows you to do that. We really appreciate that. Only 100% positive reviews, please.
Yeah, if you don't like the show, just keep it to yourself.
Just shut up. I don't want to hear it. So Letterkenny. Naomi, what was your first experience with Letterkenny?
Well, I watched it for the first time yesterday.
This is my thesis. My thesis that this is a bit more of a boy show than a girl show.
It was just not on my radar. I mean, for sure, I knew you were watching it. If you're like, I'm going to watch Letterkenny, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to go read or something.
I went on a run a couple of years ago. I think it was midwinter. And I did watch the first 7, 8 seasons, I think. I just watched them over a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah, it's easy. Just let it run. And the seasons are only like 6 episodes, 6 half-hour episodes long.
Yeah, each season.
You could watch a season in an evening.
In the evening, yeah. And I
did.
Yeah. It is a bingeable show at that level, yeah.
Yeah.
What are your first impressions of the show, Naomi?
I mean, that I kind of don't love the narrative or the idea that there's like boy stuff and girl stuff. Although like
we have this fight sometimes where it's not a fight. We have this discussion where it's like I'm watching something or I'm like, oh, I want to watch this, and then I say, but I don't know if you're gonna like it because I think it's more of a boy thing.
Or like maybe I push against the notion that like I don't like boy stuff because I feel like there's a lot of stuff.
Oh, is that what you're pushing against?
Yeah, maybe because I think like there's a lot of like quote unquote boy stuff that I actually do like.
Yeah.
But
this is a quick sidebar.
And there's a lot of quote unquote girl stuff that I don't like.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what's not either boy or girl? Our audience. I was just looking at stats today on Spotify. Our listenership was exactly 50-50, male and female, as far as Spotify can tell.
Huh.
Anyway, that's just an aside.
That's interesting.
This feels a bit more like a boy show,
I mean, almost all the characters are male. This is
main
true.
characters.
And yeah, like there's a masculine vibe to it, for sure. I don't know, like maybe there's something about it. Like I don't love it as much as you guys do, I will admit. It's funny though, like
I don't go around the house quoting Letterkenny.
No, but it's funny because since watching these few episodes,
wake up in the morning.
I realized watching these episodes that like a lot of the stuff in there's familiar. Like, oh, I've heard people quote this a lot, and I like there's just like the one guy who's always like Sturt.
Yeah, Sturt.
And like I'm like, who is it that I know that always says Sturt?
The two skids are Stuart, and the main ones are Stuart and Rold is always saying Stuart. He always says his name in that way, Stuart.
And then there's other things in there too where I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. But like I can't remember who it is that I know who always says these things.
You can't remember.
I just can't remember. I'm just like, oh, that's so familiar. I know someone who says Stuart. But I don't know why they would, because I don't even know anyone called Stuart.
So it must be the show they're referencing.
Yeah,
right?
like I just can't put it together. Like, where have I heard this? But it feels so familiar, and there's other little sayings in there that I'm like, oh.
It's so quotable. The show is
really
has all these verbal flair that's just meant to be remembered.
I mean, it is impressive, the writing and the delivery of this like fast talking, punning.
And constantly, like, no one ever talks normal.
No.
And that's literally no one ever does. Like, there's no sentence. There's no normal speech in it.
No,
ever.
it's almost like
seasons.
Shakespeare in that way. Like that.
Yeah.
Like they're almost kind of speaking in poetry in this way.
Puns and wordplay and innuendo.
And it's easy to miss stuff. Like you're just like, I'm
they
missing
talk
stuff.
so fast.
I'm missing a lot of stuff.
And their accents aren't always easy to understand.
Well, they're totally invented accents.
I wouldn't mind having closed captions
for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, because I know I'm missing a lot for sure.
Yeah, I came to Letterkenny late, like just a couple of years ago, so it was well into its run. But I don't know, Marcello, did you know it from the beginning or?
So it's not from the beginning, but I remember hearing people talk about it, like on other podcasts or whatever, and jumping in and being immediately like kind of taken in by the wordplay of it all, like the language,
mm-hmm.
which is I think one of a few things that makes this a totally unique show. Like it really is, and I think in a way, I love the show. I didn't love the last couple seasons, and I think it's because it kind of runs out that. Stuff kind of runs out of gas. It's more of the same patter and pun and stuff like that. And by the end, you're like, well, I'm not. I think I've seen this all now for whatever 80 some episodes.
81 episodes.
But I just love the. It reminded me in a way. You said Shakespeare. It's funny. I thought Deadwood. How that, which is I think the greatest television series of all time.
Never seen it.
I've been meaning to watch that for a while.
You've never seen it either. I've never
No,
seen
we can
it.
watch that.
And it's about
only
like
2 seasons.
It's pretty much Shakespearean, but filled with curse words. And this is not that same level of highfalutenness, right? And it's the most obscene and crude show I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
by far. By far.
I don't love the poop humor.
But even the juvenile stuff like that, even the fart stuff and the poop stuff and whatever, they go so far with it that it becomes funny, not because of what it's about, but because they're still talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're doing 5 minutes on farts, and it's after the 4th minute you start to laugh. Like, it's just I can't believe they're still talking about this.
Or we're gonna do 5 minutes on ejaculating in space.
Right.
You're like, oh, when is this gonna end? Oh, this is not gonna end. This is gonna keep going. Really well done. It is an incredible. You know what? Like,
the delivery is like so deadpan too.
Yeah.
Like, there's this certain way that they banter. Like, the whole thing is banter.
So this is Letterkenny is based on a YouTube series. I'm not sure if you'd seen any of those original YouTube videos from 2013.
A couple of them, yeah.
From 2013, there was a YouTube channel. It's called Letterkenny Problems, and Jared Kesso with the guy who plays Derry. His name's Nathan Dales. They did these videos, and they were just a couple of minutes long. And the whole video was cutting from Wayne telling some fast talking joke that's based on like something funny happening in a rural context, and then Nathan Dale's doing the same thing, and they just went back and forth for a couple minutes, and they did it on. They referred to there's like typical Canadian references in there. Talk about hockey and a lot as well. That's obviously a really big part of the show is hockey culture too. And so there's they made 7 or 8 of those videos, and they got really big numbers on YouTube. And that's, of course, Jared Kesso was already a known actor in Canada, having played. I mean, the one thing off the top of my head I remember him doing was playing Don Cherry in that CBC biopic or whatever. So he was a known actor, and he's very good at comedy. Like, he's very good in the show. And the verbal acrobatics to deliver the lines in the show is really impressive from him.
Which he writes. I saw an interview saying that of all the slang terms, like, half of them are made up. Like, but half of them are from like his town, Listowel, whatever it's called. That's the way people actually did talk in his hometown.
And I feel like I know those rhythms and some of those expressions, like, as you do too, I'm sure. Like, you've heard real people say things kind of Letterkenny-esque well before the show. It's like, seems informed enough by real rural speech patterns without obviously exaggerating it so much. So that basically when they got my understanding is they got a deal with Crave, owned by Bell. And what happened is they brought on Jacob Tierney, who plays Glenn. And he ended up as a co-creator on the show and also the director, I think, of all of the episodes. Maybe all 81, if not all, almost most of them.
Is Glenn the one with the beard?
Glenn, does he have a beard ever? No.
Glenn's the pastor.
Oh, him.
He's a pastor early on.
Yeah.
They get rid of the church pretty quickly because they're like, this isn't much fun.
No.
Let's get out of the church. But he's Glenn the pastor who's like supposedly like closeted gay man, but very performatively gay man.
Yeah.
And he just ends up being in all the other places in Letterkenny eventually.
He has every job
he has every job in town. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because so Jacob Tierney was a really big part of making Letterkenny, like, giving it its aesthetic and stuff. And so I'm really impressed by this show at how unique it is, because it truly is different than anything else on TV. And except maybe Shoresy, which is the same creative team later. So
it's a spin-off, right?
It's a spin-off, yeah. So Shoresy will probably, I know that Marcello, you're a big fan of Shoresy. And
I do like Shoresy a lot.
I've watched the first season and I really like it too. So we'll be talking about Shoresy again eventually, based on a character that Jared Kesso also plays on Letterkenny. On Letterkenny, he's a hockey player. He's famously foul-mouthed and quick-witted, but we never see his face. His face is always obscured on Letterkenny, and he got his own show as a junior hockey player. And
senior.
It's senior.
The No Show, the North Ontario Senior Hockey
So
Association.
it's everybody is past hope.
yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
So, we watched, because Naomi had watched any of the show before. We watched the first episode just yesterday, and it was really fun to go back and look at an early episode too. So the first screen you see when you start Letterkenny season 1, episode 1, titled "Ain't No Reason to Get Excited," is, so it says on screen, it has a picture of a farmhouse, their farmhouse. It says Letterkenny consists of hicks, skids, hockey players, and Christians. These are their problems. So announcing that this is a show about subcultures, cliques in a small town, and the kind of conflicts they're going to have. And that changes later on. And I'm not sure what point they change that, but eventually they get rid of that identification of the different groups and just say, there are 5,000 people in Letterkenny. These are their problems. So I think that's kind of interesting. It's like less harshly divisive at that point. So how about this framing device for all of the episodes, where it's like Wayne is telling a story. It's like the whole show is like Wayne telling a story. And he always begins it by saying something along these lines. A couple hockey players come up to the produce stand the other day. He always says something along those lines. And so he says
It's always the other day.
It's always something happened the other day. And then we cut to what that thing was. And this opens with Wayne and Daryl and what's his name again?
Squirrely Dan.
And Squirrely Dan, the big fella, K. Trevor Wilson. He was I think besides Jared Kesso, he's like the best actor. Glenn is very good too. I mean, Jared Kesso delivers all the lines like with crispness and velocity, and you understand what he's saying. And I think like
I like Stuart.
Stuart's very good too. Yeah, actually, you're right. He delivers that. The way the skids talk, that's the thing with the subcultures. They all have their own jargon too and their own mode of speaking. And so we're with the hicks mostly, so we kind of love their patois. We get to know it. But like the way that the skids talk is like epic Lord of the Rings.
Wondrous.
I love the kind of shit that
And they're always dancing.
They say things like, so Stuart would say something like this: hysterics are fruitless. Tears are useless. Pain is inevitable. Like really epic stuff like that. So anyway, this season, the whole series, it opens with the hicks hanging out at the produce stand and the hockey players roll up.
You forgot about Katie, who's also there.
They roll up in their Jeep.
She's not there.
She's not there yet.
No, Katie's in the Jeep. She gets out of the Jeep.
Right.
Oh, right.
These days, so
with Riley and Jonesy.
Both
of whom she's dating at the time.
Yeah.
So Katie's fun. She's always got a couple of boyfriends on the go, and she's often hanging out with both of them at the same time.
Yeah, they're like a threesome, a triad.
It's kind of the hockey players. So this is another big part of Jared Kesso's life because he played junior hockey like competitively, and so he did that. He did that for a long time, and so hockey culture.
That's why hockey's such a big part.
Hockey's such a big part, and there are seasons of Letterkenny that are like overwhelmingly dedicated to the hockey storylines.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very popular, as was the Shoresy hockey player character. So that's why the Shoresy spinoff ended up working. But all right, yeah, right. So this whole season opens with the hockey players, and they're like, and the hicks don't like the hockey players. But this is a problem because Katie, who is a hick, because she's Wayne's sister, she's dating these two hockey players. And so there's immediate animosity between Wayne, who's a protective brother, and these two doofusy hockey players
who basically function as one person throughout the show.
Through the entire series, they're one guy.
I mean, I wonder if they ever appear separately.
My favorite episode maybe we'll talk about later, in the spelling bee episode,
like together.
they're competing together. No one questions it.
And they each have a name tag that says Riley and Jonesy.
Yeah, so they come up to the microphone
together.
Everybody, and nobody says anything about it. Very funny. It's very funny.
So dating them both just makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. Yeah, so there's that iconic, that I guess the series like opens with that iconic scene of everybody with their vegetable stand. We've already talked about that. Squirrely Dan tells a story about getting tasered by the cops on his nipples that he figures...
His nipple ring got stuck on the taser.
Which he figures amplified the electricity. Squirrely Dan adds an extra S to most
he pluralizes things for no reason.
Like almost every word.
So anyway, yeah, so Wayne and the hockey players, they stand off. They just have verbal sparring, and the hockey players take off their shirts, and then there's comments and all that stuff. Anyway, we get a sense, there's a conflict between the Hicks and the hockey players.
And I think you get a sense in that scene too, like how much insults are going to factor in this show, because it's all insults, and how the Hicks are the best at it. I think in that scene he calls them, "You're a cup of baby carrots," which I think is one of the funniest put downs you could ever give someone.
That is a funny one. Cup of baby carrots. The next scene, we're at Modine's bar, so another important place in the show. So Gail, the waitress or the bar owner and the bartender, she says, they're buying drinks for themselves and they want to buy Gail a drink. And Gail says, none for me. I'm on 9 vitamins a day. And she lists them all. And then Wayne says, how many darts? And Gail says, 20, 25 darts. So darts. I
don't get it.
Cigarettes.
Do you know that darts are cigarettes, Naomi?
I didn't know that.
See, that's something I knew. I knew that from real life, I think. I'd heard a lot of people talk about darts.
That's so funny. I've never heard that. Or if I did, I didn't know what they were talking about.
Never heard anyone, no one in Ottawa ever referred to cigarettes as darts?
Not that I recall.
Ever hear people talk about cigarettes as darts?
I haven't. I hadn't.
You hadn't?
No,
I
hadn't.
Oh my God. So that really is Southern Ontario lingo, because definitely growing up, people in high school were talking about darts.
I mean, the people I know that were most, akin to the characters on the show, at least in their speech patterns, are all from like the Ottawa Valley, the small towns, in the Ottawa Valley. Yeah. But everyone, when I was 23 when I left Ottawa, so I always I was really young when I knew people. Yeah. There, but they were all kind of part of the music scene that I was hanging around, and a lot of them were like straight edge, so they didn't drink or smoke.
So they never would have said darts.
So they never would have said darts. But probably their parents said darts. But I just never heard it.
Then we cut to, it's just, I love the way that the show is edited. The pacing of the show is amazing. We just see the skids dancing to EDM in a parking lot. Yeah. Outside the convenience store. And there's no explanation. We just see them dance for like 30 seconds. And it's like the music in the show is always really good, and it always really gets you going. And then anyway, we cut away. That's it.
And the skids are basically kind of goths.
They're goths, but they're also, especially early on, it's emphasized how many drugs they do.
Yeah, they're dealers and users.
And so in this scene, they're I think they're on meth. At least that's what Wayne says a little bit later. Now, and this is funny because this is not typical of the series overall, but we go to the Christian youth group. It's called the Burning Bush. And this is where we meet Glenn. So Glenn's up there as a youth pastor, and he brings it he'd be like, what? Bring my girlfriend up, Jenny. And so Jenny is this woman who's dressed very
more of a girl than a woman. She looks like a kid.
She looks very young, and she's dressed kind of like in a Quaker style. I don't know if she's not Amish, because that's a whole other subculture that we meet later. More than a subculture, but and Glenn says, "This is my canvas." So he's speaking about his girlfriend Jenny. "This is my canvas. It's blank and it's colorless and it's flat. But, so God gave you to me as a canvas." Anyway, they cut out the Christian stuff because I think probably they found it hard to make fun of a religious.
It's interesting that even that first title screen says Letterkenny consists of and Christians are mentioned there, but they're never mentioned really again in the show. In fact, Glenn stops being a kind of a pastor quick through it, and we never go inside that church again.
After the first season, I don't think he's a pastor at all.
So they've eliminated that subgroup.
Yeah,
maybe it's just not funny.
I don't think
maybe it's not.
You can only make fun of certain groups, right? And so making fun of a religious group is a lot more fraught than these are just.
Well, the Mennonites take a few hits in that.
That's true. That's a little bit later. That's funny because Jonathan Torrance shows up and he's kind of the leader of this.
Noah Dick.
He's a Noah Dick. He's like a paterfamilias of this Mennonite family. And I wonder, I have to be honest, I don't find that funny that much. I didn't find the Mennonite stuff working for me that well.
That was one of those things where it was all the puns and innuendo.
It was all based on their last name being Dick. It's too easy.
Her name was Anita Dick, and
too easy, right?
They went over there to bang box, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
I
don't know that one. It's funny. It's a little bit different when you're making fun of someone's subculture that's based on we like meth and EDM. That's our subculture. It's a little bit. It feels like a little bit different, right?
But like there's whole TV shows making fun of like evangelical Christians, like the Mighty Gemstones.
That's true.
So I don't think it's a taboo that people don't want to make fun of. I think it's. I mean, who knows? Why
it's pretty mild.
It's mild.
Yeah.
I mean, the one stereotype they always make them is that they run really fast, which I think is hilarious. Like, oh God, they can run. The Mennonites.
The Mennonites can
God,
run.
they can run.
And Mennonites are also Christian. It's just a different kind of Christian. So like maybe they're just like, oh, these like regular Christians aren't that funny. These like youth group Christians, but maybe Mennonites are funnier. I don't know.
That's like quite later in the season though. We're talking or in the series. It's season 8 or something. Here we're still just getting to know who Wayne is, and Wayne, he just broke up with his girlfriend, and so we're wondering, what does that mean for changes in Wayne's life? And so Katie's hanging out with Wayne. She's like, I miss the old Wayne. And what's the old Wayne like? Well, Katie says, remember when you were 19 and those worm pickers kept trampling our beans in the middle of the night? What did you do? And then Wayne says, I dug 6-foot holes, put a skunk in each one, and waited for them to fall in. And I love how worm pickers are like the worst thing that's happening in Letterkenny. It comes up again later. So by the end of this episode, Wayne beats up the new boyfriend of his ex-girlfriend.
So
in
like,
the parking lot because
Wayne,
he has to reclaim his toughness, and that's kind of the arc of season 1 is him fighting all these different dudes to become the toughest guy in Letterkenny again.
I think that's early in that season. Like he reclaims the throne as the toughest guy in Letterkenny.
Yeah,
and he fights all the tough guys.
Yeah,
and it's funny for a show, and there's 12 seasons. There's a lot of fighting. Like there's fights constantly.
There's always like a slow motion fight scene where they got some cool music playing and they're all beating each other up.
But there is kind of, and maybe I'm going too far. There's always this honor amongst it too. Like when he's claiming his role as toughest man in Letterkenny, everyone lines up to take him on, and when they lose, they shake their hands and move on. Like it seems like all the fights are like noble in a weird way.
There's like gentleman's honor involved for sure.
So it's not chaotic.
Well, it's like
it's not just fights breaking out.
Well, first of all, the fact that there is a consensus about who the toughest person is, and there's like a list of there's a hierarchy that everyone agrees upon that Wayne has to climb again. So he ends up beating up Joint Boy. Isn't Joint Boy the guy he has to beat up to become? And Joint Boy later on like joins kind of the crew. Is it? I'm trying to remember. It's Joint Boy, which is a very funny name for a character. In the spelling bee, it's really funny when they're like when Jim Dickens is calling Joint Boy up to the microphone for his word. He's like, Joint Boy, where's Joint Boy? And Jim Dickens is like, I guess that is his name. I have to use it.
And it says it on his name tag too.
Yeah.
So do Katie and Wayne have parents?
I was just gonna talk about how there's
no parents.
There's no one in any other generation. There's no kids.
Yeah, just gonna say,
no parents.
where are the old people?
It's all, everyone's the same-ish age in the whole town.
And how old are they?
They're all 20 to 40.
No
one really works other than
on their
Gail.
farm.
They never see them working. Gail has a job at the bar.
Yeah.
So does Bonnie McMurray, works at the bar.
Yeah.
But they don't, like, there's this, again, that's part of how it's not a real place.
Yes,
in the same way that it's not real because no one talks this way. Yeah. It's also not real because there's no one over the age of probably 30, except for maybe Noah Dick on the colony, but he's not a main character. There's no old people, no young people.
Yeah, that is interesting. I hadn't thought about that age thing.
It's funny because Wayne it says he hates kids. There's none in Letterkenny, so he's fine.
Well, do you want to go to, okay, I mean, we're just kind of jumping around here. Did you want to go to an episode? Well, we've been talking about the Spelling Bee episode quite a bit. This is, we can jump to that one. This is a few seasons later. This is season 5, episode 4. It is known as the Spelling Bee. And so this isn't the first scene, but like one of the early scenes, they're inside the farmhouse. And Wayne says, so like it's all the hicks sitting inside the farmhouse. And the picture of the aerial view of the farmhouse is behind them on the wall. And Wayne says, it's cold outside. It's down to 10 Neil deGrasse Tysons. And this becomes a bit where they reference, they tell the temperature with a celebrity name.
Didn't they first say it's minus 10 Degrassi junior highs?
Yeah,
that's next.
They're doing it with, they're playing on the word degrees.
Degree, yeah. So then later on, it's like, we're going to get down to 10 Degrassi Junior Highs. So that's a bit that comes back a few times. They're also here, they're doing a bit where they are communicating to each other in the lyrics of famous Canadian musicians. And so they're having a disagreement about whether Daryl can beat up Dan. And Wayne says, in the words of legendary Canadian singer-songwriter Alanis Morissette, you ought to know. And then Daryl says, in the words of legendary Canadian songwriter Greg Keeler of Blue Rodeo, it hasn't hit me yet. And then Dan says, in the words of Jim Cuddy, also of iconic Canadian rock band Blue Rodeo, try. And they go on quite a bit. And so it's a nice little round of Canadiana. What's funny about this episode is how important the spelling bee is to everybody and like how tragic the fact that Katie lost the previous year and everybody's so worried if she can reclaim the title or not.
To Stuart. She lost to Stuart.
Stuart beat her in the spelling bee. And, they're wondering if Katie is up, she's upstairs. Is she studying? Is she training?
Is she
hydrated enough for the spelling bee? And Wayne says, she lost last year when she forgot a silent E. It was totally out of character. That silent E will follow her around the rest of her life. And like Wayne has got his his forehead on his arm and like looking out the window. He's like really tragic poses. It's really, really, really well done. And so then Katie comes down a bit later downstairs, just in the farmhouse, and Derry's doing Sudoku puzzles, and Dan is lifting weights, and Wayne is playing guitar. And they've made Katie a green smoothie. And then she's like, what's going on here? And Wayne says to her, I'm a little concerned that you're not working on your neuroplasticity, Katie. Because they're all working on their neuroplasticity.
And it's funny because they never do any of those things ever before, or afterwards.
They're just trying to set a good example so she'll like do them too, and then she'll become an even better speller.
There's all kinds of fun. Everyone in the town is going to be in the spelling bee. And
each like segment, like each subculture has a represent.
Every subculture is represented there. So McMurray, we haven't talked about yet. McMurray's he's like such a hick that he's not even part of the hicks. He's like, because he speaks so quickly in such a slurred manner.
And mumbles.
He ends up mumbling, and that's his like signature. That's his kind of signature character trait. And so Wayne said, no, I think Dan says McMurray's been known for spelling dirty. Which actually does come true. And he says to Katie, Dan, still giving her a pep talk before the spelling bee, it's like, we appreciate that you can spells mean, but we want you to spells meaner. That's squirrely Dan. So and there's fun punk music as everyone is entering the spelling bee, classic Letterkenny style. What do you so there's the whole spelling bee scene. What do you guys like about this scene? This is like a classic episode. It is one of the best.
And I saw it for the first time today.
What'd you think?
It was a really good episode for sure. Yeah,
it really looms large for Naomi.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously the fact that you already brought up that Riley and Jonesy are one person in the spelling bee is funny. Amazing.
So somehow Coach. There's so many characters in this show to keep track. Coach is also a very, very funny character. The way he always is yelling at the hockey team. He's always saying that it's embarrassing. That's his like phrase he always brings up. But somehow he's fixed the spelling bee so that his hockey players will get only the easiest words, and they're all hockey related.
Hockey related words. One of them is puck.
One of them is hockey.
One of them is hockey, and they struggle through it. They're not sure about if it's the C or the K that come first. So it's really, really quite good.
And because the coach has money. Everyone has money, like, riding on it, right? So
yeah, and so does Tanis. And we haven't talked about Tanis yet, who was one of my, if not my favorite character in the whole series.
Right. So played by Tio, I think Canateo Horn is her name.
Yeah,
she's a Mohawk woman.
She's fantastic.
She's very good
in this series. Yeah. And so she's there work kind of taking the bets for the spelling bee.
Yeah.
I love every episode that she's in. I think she's my favorite character. I remember talking to
so one of the subcultures. I mean, is it fair to call them that? I mean, they're one of the groups.
Yeah, for sure.
Are the natives, and that's what they call themselves. They're a group of indigenous young people that Tanis leads. Yeah. She's kind of the leader.
She's like the mean bully leader.
Yeah. She calls herself Auntie, or they call her Auntie too. Yeah. Yeah.
And she sells smokes, and her crew sells smokes in Letterkenny.
That's right. Yeah.
She has a brief romance with Wayne.
That's right.
Gets pregnant, has an abortion.
That's
One
right.
of very few kind of. It was like,
They had a cliffhanger.
Yeah. It's like, is this going to be an issue? No, it was resolved in 8 seconds.
That's so funny. That's the end of season 2 is that she was pregnant with Wayne's child. And they were like, yeah, is this going to be a storyline? And it wasn't.
Nope.
They you could tell they just changed their minds. They're like, you know what? We're not doing that kind of a show.
Do you think they changed their minds, or that was just a dangle, and it's like we're not that kind of show?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's the end of season 2, so the show is still. I mean, it's pretty well established at that point, I suppose. Yeah. But maybe they're thinking. It's hard to say. I mean, the show had a very quick turnover in production. Like they were doing often 2 seasons a year. Even. I mean, they were short seasons of only 6 episodes. So I wonder how much they're just writing. Like they're just writing as they're going, and they're like, no, we thought we'd do that, but let's do something different now. But it is kind of funny how quickly they resolve that.
I saw an interview with I forget who was on the show. They're talking about how we talked about the pattern, the wordplay, and the slang from all the Letterkenny characters.
Yeah.
And Kesso wasn't sure how to do it for the indigenous characters. Like how do you write dialogue for Tanis and her crew?
Right.
And he let Tanis or let the actors do it.
He'd have to.
And so it's apparently it's quite kind of realistic. Kind of what kind of Ontario reserve indigenous folks on reserves would how they would talk and kind of their slang.
She's from a Mohawk reserve near Montreal, but also is like kind of there's a lot of Montreal involved in the show because Jacob Tierney is a Montrealer. So there's a lot of eventually some of the groups they represent are like the Quebecois groups. They call them the French.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of real Quebecois, they're Quebecois actors. And Glenn and Jacob Tierney himself, later on in Shoresy, he plays French characters.
He's
speaking French.
He's like a hockey commentator.
A hockey commentator, right. So there's a lot of, anyway, there's a big Montreal presence in the show as well. So what were we saying about this scene?
No, I was just talking about the character of Tanis. How which I always enjoy when she was in an episode.
Yeah,
because she's like a physical presence. Like she's this tall, striking, beautiful woman who's maybe one of the meanest people in the whole show.
She's quite mean,
but also kind of good-hearted and everything else. Like she's kind of this fabulous leader of her crew, and kind of works her way into the Letterkenny kind of system, like all the other groups too.
Yeah,
which I was saying before when we talk about how the show is this apparent conflict between these different kind of groups.
Yeah,
it really isn't. And as time carries on, like. Whoever needs, I think this is the kind of if there's a core message for a show like this, and I don't know if there is, maybe I'm stretching, but it's that you help out someone when they need help, and that's one. Your friend asks for help, you help them out. They say that they say that over and over and over again during the show, and it doesn't matter if you're a skid or a hick or a hockey player, or a native from the reserve or even the Mennonites. You always help out someone when they have one of their problems,
right?
And the only kind of the only sin that's unforgivable is like some sort of betrayal, and the only villains on the show are when someone gets cheated on.
Yeah, and Wayne gets cheated on.
Katie gets cheated on. Derry gets cheated on. And so that's the worst crime you could commit. In Letterkenny, it's not selling drugs or selling smokes. It's not fighting. That's for sure. No, for sure. It's not cheating and spelling bee.
Not day drinking.
It's not day drinking. It's not even burning down the produce stand. It's like betrayal is the ultimate sin in Letterkenny.
They do the thing where when the show begins, it's like, oh, the hockey guys are like Wayne's enemy, the Hick's enemy, but soon enough. They're just kind of part of the crew, and it does that that narrative thing where an enemy, like a former antagonist, becomes a friend, and that's how you keep a show like this going. And that's why the crew gets bigger. It seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger every season because there's more and more characters who are introduced sometimes as antagonists in some fashion. Because Tanis is like that too, early on as an antagonist.
She's in.
And so, but then soon they're outsiders or insiders, and that's Joint Boy is then part of the crew after. gets beat up and submits to Wayne as the toughest guy. And,
and I think like the only
and the French too, right? Because the French at first are antagonists, but then they start dating the French girls, and now they're part of the Letterkenny system. So
the only true villains are always people who are outside of Letterkenny altogether.
The
DJs from upcountry.
Exactly. The degenerates from upcountry. They call them degens.
What is upcountry?
I don't even know.
Just somewhere else. They're from somewhere else, Naomi.
And what do they do that's so degenerate?
Well, it changes as the seasons
They treat their dogs badly. That's one thing.
They treat their dogs badly. They're probably racist.
Yeah, they do a lot of drugs.
They do. Yeah, they're dirty.
Yeah.
They're poor. I mean, it's a kind of a class concept too. Like these are people who are probably poor. They probably have poor hygiene. They have poor manners. No one understands them when they talk. They probably don't treat their family well or whatever. The degens are just the worst in all categories. And it's kind of significant because you don't really see them. Like you don't see degens very often, right?
No, and they never join.
They're never.
Degens are always outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The final season, the final episodes is a Letterkenny versus degen.
The degens show up. I haven't seen the final episodes.
So that's the whole series closes on the kind of almost this kind of final battle between the degens.
So you must see a lot more of the degens at that point then.
No, they don't. Not a lot. But they're there every now and again, and
Okay.
the final few episodes is degen heavy.
There you go. That makes a lot of sense. This is not an episode that we watched for today, but and I forget what it's called, but it's the one where the brothers, the Bay brothers, James and Hudson Bay, they returned to town, Letterkenny, and like their shtick is so they're like well-known hockey players, they're professional hockey players in Europe.
Europe. They're playing Europe.
And here's the thing: everyone in town in Letterkenny are proud of them, because every single subculture has a connection to them. They're part native all the way, as Tana says. They're obviously they're hockey players, so Riley and Jonesy, admire them.
They're hicks.
They're hicks as well because somebody's related. I don't know if somebody's related.
Yeah, they just farm. They were farmers.
They
Their
were
family's
farmers. And then also Stuart is their cousin.
Yeah.
So he's also related to the Skids. And so like there are these great these figures who bring the whole town together symbolically because everybody's actually attached to them and everybody loves them. But you know how many times they show, and also it's obviously like a joke on Canadian geography that these two big, reference to the two big lakes. Like it's kind of a symbolic gesture. Like look at Canada as a land, how everybody can get together here. Like I guess maybe that's a bit of a stretch. I don't know. It seems like that to me a little bit. And guess what? They never. I don't think they ever show up again.
No, the Bay brothers never show up again.
Because when they show up, there's no conflict anymore, right? Because when they show up, everybody gets along and everybody worships them and loves them. So that was kind of interesting. So anything else you wanted to say about the spelling bee? It is a very, very funny episode.
I believe in the beginning of the spelling bee, they also introduce the women's hockey team.
Oh yeah, the women's hockey team.
The Shamrockettes.
Yep, the Shamrockettes.
With Betty Ann and Marianne, who hate each other and say spew the most vile insults at each other in their locker room.
And then Riley and Jonesy, who are coaching them, they're like, we don't know how to deal with this. They have no idea how to deal with this. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the women's hockey team is great. Well, let's go. Okay, I have a few things to say about the Sled Shack one. So this is Sled Shack season 3, episode 1. This is really fun. This is just the 3rd season of the show, but it's different because now it's winter. It's the first winter Letterkenny, and so you get to see the Hicks doing winter activities. And it opens with, I think this episode is really beloved for the cold open.
Yes.
So to speak, because this is an alphabetical ode to winter that Wayne pronounces directly to camera along with Derry. Derry kicks in a word here and there, and it's all done alphabetically. Now, obviously, I'm not going to even try to do this all for you, but just to give you a sense of how this works, is that, okay, so Daryl's on camera, and he says, all right, after autumn. And then Wayne kicks in. Ask anyone around the area about accuracy. Arctic activities are abundant, astonishing, astounding, A1 on all accounts. Then Derry kicks in. Before, Beach bodies bros better bundle up in boots, blankets, and balaclavas because a bloody bitter breeze blows brisk, blustery, and bleep. And Derry says, careful. Anyway, it goes on through the whole alphabet to Z.
It's remarkable.
It is really remarkable. And I think they go back to that once or twice.
They do it, yeah.
Because it was so cool. It was really, really neat. So it's a really, like, you're not expecting this. You're like, why do this?
Yeah,
Just
there's
'cause
no
it's
reason
fun.
for it. It's
just
this kind
fun.
of like this indulgent sort of thing that and either you're gonna love that or hate it as an audience member because it doesn't move a story forward. It has nothing to do with the plot. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But it's just so fun to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. The show just indulges in that verbal wordplay like all the time. I mean, that's really the main source of its pleasure. And so I just love just a funny idea to try to do that. It's obviously a chance for Kesso to show off too, like, because it's really remarkable line reading. What else is? I don't really have a lot of notes about that episode, Nemo. We just watched that one. What else is happening in Sledgehammer? I mean, they want to build a shack where they can drive their
Snowmobiles,
the snowmobile or their sleds, as they call them, out to and hang out and ice fish and stuff, right?
And they want to sell sushis and sashimi.
They have a whole, again, they have a bantering bit about what is considered sushi and sashimi.
Sushis and sashimis.
And it's blowing up. So this is the Hicks hanging out, and this is blowing Squirrely Dan's mind because he's always, his like signature verbal tick is he puts an extra S on everything. And they're doing it. Suddenly Wayne and Daryl are doing that. They're putting an extra S referring to all the fish.
Yeah,
The
salmons,
fishes.
and
Salmons
trouts.
and sushi's and sashimis and then and Dan is like, wait a minute, like I don't think you're supposed to put an extra S on that. And it's just a very, very good bit as they're sitting in the sled shack.
When they get their shack, they get a sign on the door that says sushis and sashimis.
That's right, they build their shack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the conflict in this one comes when they come back to the shack one day and it's been vandalized, or is it just torn down?
It's vandalized.
It's been vandalized, and they're like degens. The degenerates from Upcountry did that to them. What else is going on? It's just a fun winter episode. It's fun to see Letterkenny in the winter. Anything else about that, Naomi?
I don't remember anything about the episode somehow, except like the ice fishing at the beginning and the sushis and sashimis.
Sushis and sashimi.
And their Jenny, their generator.
They call it a Jenny. Yeah. Have either of you ever ridden a snowmobile?
Yeah.
Where did you do it?
It was for a story. I was right in the back. I was writing about a fur trapper, and I was behind. I
Ooh.
was on the back of a snowmobile driving through like a parcel of land just for trapping.
Oh, okay. Where was that?
Between here and Edmonton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like up north
Yeah,
a bit. I used to ride my friend's snowmobile, and this was a real Letterkenny situation because he lived on a farm around the corner, like a little bit further than that. But his dad let him probably quite dangerously ride a snowmobile, and I would go over and we'd ride the snowmobile together, and I get to drive sometimes. We flipped it over a few times. We were fine. But yeah, the sled, did we call it a sled? No, I definitely didn't. I guess we could talk about Hard Right J. Now this is a kind of a little bit out of the ordinary for Letterkenny in that it's kind of it's talking about politics, like a little. I mean, in a way,
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. It's like really indulging in the rhetoric, like making fun of the rhetoric. Of extreme right-wing views. So Hard Right J refers to Jay Baruchel, who plays this alt-right character who comes to Letterkenny. And
With a tiki torch. With a tiki torch in
torch.
his backpack.
Yeah. So this is season 5, episode 3. And so the episode begins with the Hicks at the Ukrainian. Is it the Ukrainian club? Is that what it's called? The Ukrainian Center? The Ukrainian Center. So they're drinking in a different locale. And then we've sometimes seen them. And they're discussing the headlines of the city newspaper that day. And what they're going to do, what's happening is they're changing the name of the junior girls soccer team in Letterkenny. And they're called the Chiefs, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's also offensive. And the paper is running a contest to find a new name for the team. And so the name that is currently winning in votes is the Rough Riders. And the name running a close second is the Muff Riders. So it's pretty, this is good. These are good jokes. And of course, Rough Riders, referring to like the ubiquity of the name Rough Riders in Canadian sports, where the CFL, the Canadian Football League, which
Only has a handful of
has
teams.
8 teams. There were for a while, a long time, 2 of them were named the Rough Riders.
And so they talk about how like all the neighboring towns have teams called the Rough
Yeah,
Riders.
that's right.
Later on, there's a bit how all the towns are the Rough Riders. And Katie's like, they're saying, oh, the Rough Riders are playing the Rough Riders. And then Katie's like, oh, that'll be a good game. And then Wayne has a bit about it too. He says, yeah, but if we're all going to be Rough Riders, then why even have teams? Why not just be a big bunch of Rough Riders? Why don't you just name the whole league the Rough Riders? Why even stop there? Why don't we just go ahead and name the whole human race Rough Riders? So this episode really is a tour de force for Jay Baruchel. It makes me really appreciate him along with the movie Blackberry that Naomi and we did on the show earlier, which he's really good in. And I was like, yeah, I think Jay Baruchel's a pretty good actor, and they give him really good lines in this. So he's this how would you describe Jay Baruchel, Naomi?
He's like this clean cut looking guy with like khaki trousers and like a white shirt and this like.
He's a Charlottesville guy.
He's got, yeah,
He's
he's dressed like a Charlottesville protester.
neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
And he has like the same haircut, the flip on top.
Yeah, the flip on top. And he shows up. It's like he's come to town because he's looking for like hicks to join his right wing
Well, he's trying to stop
movement.
He's trying to protest them
right.
changing the name of the team.
Right.
from
So
the
he's
Chiefs.
offended by
the woke libtards are forcing you to break
yeah,
tradition, all this kind
but
of
he
stuff.
like assumes that these small town people are all going to be on his side, and none of them are on his side.
So when Hard Right Jay goes into the Ukrainian center, the Hicks are drinking at the bar, and he says, it's time to wake up. It's time for you to spit out all of the toxic sludge you've been spoon-fed by the Ian Hannah-Mansings and the Gloria Makarenkos of the world. We are a movement. So again, we love the Canadian references, because who else is going to know who Ian Hannah-Mansing is? And then, so they're not into it. And then the Hicks are not into joining his movement. And so then it's funny because he just he visits all of the subcultures of the town to see who might join him. So he goes to the hockey rink. And this is really funny because Riley and Jonesy are there and they see him walk in, and Riley says, oh, the Catholic school games are in the other rink, which is really good line. And then like they're not into what he's pitching. He's like, hey, bro, like, I think this guy is a loser or whatever. And then Hard Right Jay says, I just thought you strapping alphas might want to know that the globalists are trying to turn your small town into a hive of post-castrati extremism. And Riley's like, what the fuck's castrati? And then Jonesy says, it's pasta, bro. They give Jay Baruchel really good lines in this one. They really... post-castrati extremism.
And then he's like, are the Irish coming and telling you can't be called the Shamrocks anymore? And then they're like, actually, maybe we shouldn't be called the Shamrocks. And then the Shamrockettes come out and they're like, why are we called the Shamrockettes? That's so stupid.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
then they all decide to change the names of their teams.
Yeah, suddenly everyone's like having an awakening, like, oh, you know what? These are all offensive names we have for our teams. He goes on, Hard Right Jay goes on a tear about how the Irish, like, they don't mind being made fun of. They just eat their potatoes and they never complain.
No, he said you can take away all their potatoes and starve them. They still don't complain.
They actually, you know what? They actually complained a lot. They had a whole separatist movement, independence movement. What else is going on here? Okay, so how does this episode end? Well, nobody wants to join Hard Right Jay, but he does have he has a rally in a snowy football field, and he has his Charlottesville Tiki Torch guys. There's like 10 or 12 of them, and they're confronted by Tanis and her crew, the natives, and they're not down with this guy. They have a back and forth. Tanis calls him a Nazi, and Hard Right Jay takes offense at that. He's like, I'm not a Nazi. Like, would a Nazi have a Jew for a lawyer? Jesus. And then one of Axe, who's one of the indigenous guys, he says, could you refer me, asshole? Because I'm going to need one in a minute. Pretty good exchange there. And
He
so,
says a bunch of stuff like, would a Nazi do, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember the other ones either.
yeah, would a Nazi like watch, a black man play football, basically? Stuff
Yeah.
stuff along those lines.
Would a Nazi watch interracial porn?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And Tanis is like, who wouldn't? Yeah. So it's good. And then, of course, but, the Tanis is outnumbered at this point. And so we're like, oh, but they're going to take on the Nazis, but they're outnumbered. But then guess who shows up to help? The Hicks. They arrive as like, as a secondary force. And then they have one of their patented Letterkenny slow-mo
Brawl.
brawls. And it's funny. There's some funny falling. It's funny, like Nazi guys falling in the snow and stuff. It looks kind of fun.
And Tanis beats up Jay Baruchel.
And Tanis
That's right.
That's right. She gives him a punch in the face. They're old friends, so Jacob Tierney directed a movie called, this is one I know, they may have done more work together, called The Trotsky. Did you ever see that
No, I never
movie?
did.
So Jacob Tierney, I think he wrote and directed it, and he might be in it too, but that stars Jay Baruchel as a young man in Montreal, like in the early 2000s, who believes that he's the reincarnation of Trotsky. And he wears the glasses and everything. And Teal Horn is like his friend, I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so yeah, that's an old Montreal connection there. Great episode. I love Hard Right Jay. That episode is really good.
But there was one thing about you mentioned before about it makes the Ian Hannah Mansing joke.
Yeah.
And that, like, I was thinking after kind of rewatching a bunch of Letterkenny this past kind of couple weeks, is like how not just proudly Canadian the show is, how aggressively Canadian it is. Like, it knows it's writing for a Canadian audience. Like, and I know that Australians and Americans really love the show, but they're not getting it. And some of the things that are the funniest is how, like, into the Canadian minutia they mine for jokes.
Yeah.
Like, there's one episode where the Indigenous hockey team has got all these white guys on it, and they're all claiming to be Indigenous, and they're citing the Indian Act, like line an article from the article, like, from
how
the
they
Indian Act, how they qualify as to be Indigenous.
And actually, there is a white man. There's people who present as white, brown, and black.
Yeah,
and they all one by one they explain how they qualify as Indigenous.
Article 4, line 6 of the Indian Act says that because of my ground, like, and again, that's a joke that's for Canadians.
Oh yeah.
And the other one I brought, it's one of the crudest Shoresy chirps at the hockky players is like when he's talking about having sex with their mothers, which is what he always talks about.
That's always what he's talking about.
It's like, I made her come so hard. They made a Heritage Minute out of it. and Ian McKellar's Don McKellar's playing my dick. I mean,
it's very good.
Who else is going to understand that joke?
Yeah, it feels really fun, right?
That's very Canadian.
Such an insider reference. You gotta love it. Dang, that's funny.
And I was thinking too about on that respect how, in a way that Letterkenny is like the evil twin of a show like Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
Where Schitt's Creek is trying to disguise its Canadianness. You never know.
It takes place in a nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. I think there's a kind of level of there's a lot more fighting in Letterkenny than Schitt's Creek, but there's this kind of everyone's kind of kind in the end. Like everyone's kind of good-hearted people. Yeah. I think that's in both shows.
True.
But really, like, ramping up the crudeness and the Canadianness in Letterkenny. There's I can't think of another show that's as Canadian.
Yeah.
Anna Green Gables isn't this Canadian.
Degrassi.
No, but the references aren't.
Degrassi could be somewhere else, can it? All the references here are Canadian.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
Oh, when they're talking about when they meet the guys from Quebec and they're spewing back and forth insults.
Les Hicks.
Les Hicks.
Les Hicks. It's just like the French versions of our beloved Hick characters. It's very funny.
Go back to Cégep and then or go to the Bell Center and watch back-to-back Simple Plan show. Like it's so specific.
It's really good. Yeah, and they say something about, I think, because like Daryl and Dan, like Squirrely Dan, like they, for some reason, they have animosity towards the Hicks, Les Hicks, the French. And so they're saying things like, they say something disparaging about Celine Dion and like a past episode of Sweater Weather. And the French guys, like, they freak out. They totally freak out.
Yeah, until they crossed the line there until that moment. And they didn't even know what they said because they didn't speak English.
No, that's right.
Until they heard the word Celine Dion, then
Yeah.
they got riled up.
It's like, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds like you're speaking about Celine Dion in a disparaging tone, in a hostile tone. It's good stuff. Yeah. So they bring in the Quebec characters. They bring in American characters too, who are all wearing, they're like, again, they introduce them as like a subculture, as a group, these American guys. The ultra specificity of Canadian references, that must, like, to a foreign audience, that just must read as funny as well, because it's like, oh, look at these really funny references. I don't really get it, but
who's Ian Hanamansi?
Yeah, like I don't understand, and it's still fine. Like that's actually part of why we're laughing, is because I don't quite get it. So Letterkenny, R.I.P. Letterkenny, because it just finished, but we get the same spirit and a lot of the same characters and actors and stuff in Shoresy. So
I think it's funny they took the one character whose face you never see, and all he does is spew crude insults, and they made a show out of that. From that guy.
From that guy.
And it's great, which is
it is fun. I've seen the first season and I really like it. So we talked about a few episodes of Letterkenny. Any like final thoughts on Letterkenny? Anything we've missed? Any fun moments that you wanted to mention? Naomi, you've had this long-standing relationship with Letterkenny. It must be about 36 hours.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I finally know what it is, and it is impressive, like the writing and the acting, and yeah, it is. Like I'm impressed by it. I understand why people like it. I probably won't now become a big watcher of it. It's just not really my vibe. But I get it.
Who would you be? What subculture would you belong to? Would you be a hick? Would you be a skid?
I have to admit, I'd probably be a skid. If I had to be one of them. But I'd like to say I'd be a hick because they're obviously the main characters and they're
our point of view mostly.
Yeah, but I feel like I'd probably be a skid.
Cool.
What about you?
I don't know. I mean, I want to think that I'd be a hick. I would be like as cool as Wayne, but I probably wouldn't be.
You're the toughest guy in St.
I definitely would not be. I would be like a secondary hick. Like I would be like
a lesser hick.
I'd be Squirrely Dan. I'd be like a Squirrely Dan, I think.
I think you're right. You would be a lesser hick.
Hey.
I just realistically.
I wouldn't be the alpha of the group.
No. What about you, Marcello?
Oh, D-Gen all the way. No.
Oh,
be a D-Gen. No, that's what no one says.
No one says that.
No one ever says they want to be.
The final season.
Oh, okay.
Derry joins the D-Gens.
You see, he's going that way. I mean, he is the butt of a lot of jokes about how dumb he is or how crude he is, and he's always the one spitting and stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
I have to be honest, like I don't like that character very much. I never did love Daryl, and I feel like of the Hicks, he was the least of the Hicks.
He's the lesser hick. Yeah, I guess you'd want to be the hick.
You want to be Wayne. I mean, it's like, this is the thing. Like, it is like a depiction of masculinity, right?
Yeah.
That it's really campy. It's like really played up, like over the top, kind of like tough guy alpha stuff. But it's done in a way that is kind of ironic, so you can laugh at it and not take it too seriously. But at the end of the day, it is a kind of male fantasy that you could be a guy like Wayne. Whatever.
Well, and all the women on the show are gorgeous.
And everyone's
like a model.
Every woman on the show is a model, 100%. Yeah.
But they're not played up. I mean, there's the side, the girls that Jonesy and Riley take home or whatever, and like
the music video segments, especially, you see a lot of girls.
But like the main characters, though, they're not. They have a lot of sex. They talk about sex all the time. But they're not ever treated. They're never judged poorly about that. You know what I mean?
No.
It's kind of a sex positive show in that sense. Yeah. And everyone's allowed to do whatever they want.
For sure.
Yeah, totally. And like Katie's just like one of the hicks. Like she just hangs out with them. Nobody's like being harassy or like.
Well, early on, especially Wayne, is like part of his character is that he's supposed to be protective of her.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but nobody's trying. But no one's really trying much.
There's a scene, kind of a mid season series or episode where she's dating the Dirks from Michigan. She has a terrible American boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
Who cheats on her.
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember
this. And then
the
season ends with the entire Letterkenny crowd driving to Michigan and kicking his ass, like for Katie. Like, and the whole point of that is like Katie is everyone's favorite person, and so there's a slow motion scene where Katie's staring at Dirk's he's standing in the front of his house.
Yeah.
And the trucks pull up behind her,
Yeah.
and everyone gets out in slow motion. And there's Wayne at the front for sure.
Yeah.
But also the Skids are there, and the hockey players are there,
They're
and
all
McMurray
there.
is there, and they're all there. They're all there to slow mo defend Katie.
Yeah.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is pretty adorable. Yeah. So, well, anyway, that was our sweater weather about Letterkenny. It had to happen sooner or later, and I'm glad it happened. Marcello, thanks for joining us. Like to have you back.
Oh,
I
anytime.
hope you're going to be, as I said, you're the second time guest. I hope you're a regular on the show.
I hope so too.
Cool.
Did you get a chance to say everything you wanted to say about Letterkenny?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's again, seeing it, you watch it the first time and it's all just kind of absorbing the wordplay and whatever.
Yeah.
But it really is a show that's kind of got a lot of heart to it. And for a show that has so much fighting in it, it really is kind in a weird way. Like it's
rewatchable too, because
there's no darkness to it.
No, it is like kind of utopic in a lot of ways. Like, it's such a fun, bright place. It's very brightly lit. That's the style of the show too. And it's rewatchable actually, because I was rewatching it for this. I'm like, yeah, this is funny again. And I also missed some of the stuff the first time through. So anyway, Letterkenny, I guess a Canadian classic at this point. And all right, well, thanks everybody again. And thank you listeners. And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Pitter patter.
Want more sweater weather in your life? Patrons of the show get access to our premium episodes, meaning you'll receive a brand new sweater weather every week. Go to patreon.com/Canadian Sweater to sign up.